Today we have Jessica Rhoads from RCC. Jessie is our outreach specialist. We have Ms. Nellie Loewen. She's a registered nurse with UTMB Forensic Nursing Team Program Director. I'm sweating like her joke. And we have Dr. Wilson. Dr. Wilson, she's a professor of social work with the University of Houston, Clear Lake. And we're going to go ahead and start with Jessie, Nino, and Dr. Wilson. Please put your cell phones on Viber if you can. We're going to do a 20-minute presentation each, and then at the very end, we're going to open for questions. Okay. Thank you, Jessie.
Carlos mentioned, hi guys, I'm Jessica Rhoads. I'm the Community Outreach and Prevention Specialist here at RCC. I've been working at RCC for about 3 years, but I've been in this field working with survivors for about almost 8 years now. Just as a quick disclosure, come on y'all. Maybe it won't work. Okay. Quick disclosure, so we are going to be covering some sensitive material with today's panel. So if at any point you guys need to step out of the room, please take care of yourselves first, you guys. Alright, so we're going to be going over a little bit of the history of RCC, what is sexual assault, current statistics, history of prevention, and then we're going to go into prevention methods, and I got a couple of resources at the end for you guys. So the Resource and Crisis Center opened up in 1979. We started off as a shelter for women, and we were actually a branch of the YWCA. But in 1985, we became our own 501(c), and then we also changed our name in 2003 to the Resource and Crisis Center of Galveston County because we service both men, women, and LGBTQ individuals. It doesn't matter. But stepping back, actually in 1987, Galveston Island ended the only sexual assault program that they had available for victims. And RCC saw the gap in the system and the services, and we took on that role ourselves. So we've actually been servicing and assisting survivors since 1987. In 2008, we actually lost our facility due to Hurricane Ike, but we bounced back. 2019, we were able to acquire this facility. And now we have 58, it's about 53 to 58 beds, just depending on the sizes of our families, but we have been serving our community from this location since 2019. I started just a year after that, so it was actually really interesting. So what is sexual assault? So sexual assault is the use of force, fraud, and coercion to engage others in a, again, forced sexual act. It could be touching, it could be forced penetration, which we call rape. But there's a lot that goes and encompasses all of sexual assault. I listed just a couple of forms of sexual assault at the bottom. The acquaintance rape is the most common. You see that about 70% of cases. And then you have partner rape. This is usually related with marriages or significant others, boyfriends, girlfriends. Then we have date and substance facilitated rape. Or date rape, substance facilitated rape. They usually go hand in hand. They can be considered two different forms of rape or sexual assault, but they really do utilize the same tactics, unfortunately. A lot of times date rape uses roofies, or I've actually been seeing currently use of eye drops. Yes, so what a lot of people are doing nowadays is, and this is really easy, because you have to think about the form. Eye drops come in, they come in little bottles. They're supposed to be used to squirt quickly. So people go up, squirt them in the drinks, and it is basically the same tactic as roofing. And then we see child sexual abuse. Most victims for child sexual abuse is between the ages of 12 and 17, but we also see cases under 12. And then we have blitz sexual assault. This is the one that I would say is portrayed the most in social media, but is probably the least common form. A blitz sexual assault is when it's usually occurring at night. It's with a random stranger, not somebody that you know, like acquaintance, where it's 70%. It's usually happens in the dark alleys. This is what I would call, you know, the law and order SVU form of rape that most people know about. So resources are from RAIN, which is the Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network. So every 68 seconds, another American citizen is sexually assaulted. This time frame has actually gotten worse. It used to be 73 seconds 2 years ago, 3 years ago, so we've actually seen an increase in sexual assaults within the past few years. 1 in 6 American women have reported to be raped. If you look around the room, we have a majority of women in this room. The likelihood that somebody has been sexually assaulted in this room is very high, just from looking at the statistic alone. For men, it's about 3% of American men could be sexually assaulted in their lifetime. And like I was saying earlier, majority of child victims are aged 12 to 17, but 34% are under the age of 12 and 66 are between the ages of 12 and 17. And then looking at the bottom slide, the bottom part of my slide, I have both where the sexual assaults generally occur as well as what the victim is usually doing at the time. And those numbers actually quite add up very well, where you have 85, is it the morning? So we have 55% near the victim's home, so during 55% doing home activities like sleeping, that matches up. We've got about 15% in open public space and 10% in enclosed, so we're looking at about the 20% while commuting or running errands, and the 5% doing during other unknown activities. Then we got about 8% on school property, 8% at school, 12% at or near the home, and then 12% at work. So we're looking at the pretty similar statistics. I'd also like to mention that for inmates and military personnel, we do have Sexual Assault Prevention Acts. So we have PREA, which is the Prison Rape Elimination Act. We do actually at RCC go to prisons and speak with incarcerated individuals. We give them the same presentations for sexual assault awareness and domestic violence awareness. And then we also, for military personnel, you're looking at almost 19,000 individuals have experienced unwanted or sexual touching. But usually for military personnel, because they go through a different process of reporting, it's usually much harder for us to get statistics on those numbers. But that is just the general for the 19,000 military personnel. So, my favorite part, prevention, because this is the good part. This is how we talk about improving our community, making it safer for all citizens. So really, we did not see a lot of prevention efforts for education until about 20 years ago. So about the 2000s is when we start seeing PREA, VOCA, VAWA. So VAWA is the victims of, that's VOCA. Victims of Crime Act is VOCA. I cannot remember the acronym for VAWA. Victims of
Violence Against Women.
Thank you, Ms. Erica. And then we've also got PREA, which is the Prison Rape Elimination Act. And then, but starting from the 1970s and the 80s, this is when we actually saw the emergence of shelters. So this is when we started seeing women coming, speaking out, telling their stories, because this lines up with the women's movement. This is when we started seeing women being able to speak more and have more freedom in what they do and how they can, protect themselves. Skip the 90s, because that's when you start seeing the VAWA, you start seeing all these acts come out, but then the education with the acts come in the 2000s. 2010s, you see the Me Too movement. This actually started, I believe, in 2017. I believe 2017, they actually, the Me Too movement is when they started picking up on it. The Me Too movement had actually started at the very beginning of the 2010s. So it took a few years for people to catch on and make it the movement that it is now. And then going into the 2020s, we are still changing legislation to this day to protect victims, and we still have a lot of room to grow and a lot of gaps to fill, but we're actively always working on it. And I will say that there's been a lot of movement that I've seen in the community from all community members to really increase protection for women, men, and children. So now we're going to look at prevention methods. So implementing comprehensive sexual education programs. This is what I, as well as 73 other programs in the state of Texas do. So we have a set curriculum. Each program is different just based off of the community. Galveston County, you could be rural, you could be urban. It just depends on where you're at. I work with quite a few different communities. I work with the Lamar Public Library. I work with the Rosenberg Private Library. I go to prisons. I speak at schools sometimes, usually colleges. But we follow prevention education programs where I teach, the dynamics of sexual assault. We teach healthy relationships, basically the skills that you need to know to protect yourself, as well as inform the community of how we can better prevent these issues, these incidents from occurring. And that goes hand in hand with fostering a culture of consent. So when I talk about healthy relationships, it's not just teaching kids, what's right, what's wrong. It's also making sure that they are aware of what their boundaries are and their rights are. What I see a lot with teenagers nowadays is they feel a lot of ageism. Most people think that that's really only associated with elderly individuals, but teens face this quite often when it comes to healthy relationships. It's very hard for them to speak out because they don't have a voice for themselves. So you have to be that adult that allows them to give them the room to grow, give them leadership opportunities. And that's one of the things that we do is offer leadership opportunities for women. So they're less likely to potentially leave their livelihood up to another individual. One of the things that I do specifically with teens, and it might not seem like it's doing a lot, but I teach financial literacy classes, where if you teach them how to manage their own finances, you teach them how to save, you teach them how to manage their budget, then they're less likely to allow another individual to control their finances, which is an abusive tactic for domestic violence in cases. Again, 70% they know their perpetrator. So we're looking at acquaintances, we're looking at family members. So we have to look at the dynamics that they're growing up in, the environments that they're seeing. Children learn from the behaviors that they see. And if they only see abusive behaviors, then they're likely to engage in those unhealthy behaviors. So we have to give them options. We have to have those options available for them so they can make that decision for themselves. And this goes very, very closely with consent. When you teach young men and you teach young women consent early on, then they are less likely to allow somebody to take advantage of them. Perpetrators are known to go for vulnerable populations. They go for people that aren't educated. They go for people who are prideful in their communities. I hear this quite often. They say, oh, that's not in our community. Human trafficking isn't here. Sexual assault isn't here. Perpetrators go for those communities specifically because they want to blend in and they want to get away with their acts. And if you don't think it's happening in your community, then the perpetrator is going to see that and they're going to make sure that they're targeting those communities because they're easy. You don't want to see it, they don't want you to see it either. So we have to look at things, we have to be open-minded about it. So training citizens and businesses, like what we're doing today. So you guys need to learn the little bits and facts, the signs, the symptoms, and these help us better protect other individuals within our community. One of the things that we teach is bystander intervention. If you tell one person what sexual assault looks like, what a victim's symptoms look like, then you tell another 10 people, and those 10 people tell another 10 people, and then all of a sudden the whole community is aware and educated on what sexual assault looks like. It better protects everybody. You can also better help victims in this regard. You can know resources within your community. You can know where they can go if they need to report, or if they don't want to report, which is something that most sexual assault victims go through in their mind when they think about reporting, should I or should I not, then we need to be able to best support them in their process. As much as I would love every survivor to report their crime, that way we can better help them and also get better statistics, it's just not likely. We have to respect people's individual rights, and if they've already been victimized, then we don't need to re-traumatize them by forcing them into anything else. So, encouraging reporting. This is only done if you foster room for growth in your community. If you don't believe victims when they first outcry to you, if you don't have the right information, or you give them wrong information, you are directly relating to discouraging reporting. And it's because the process is already hard enough for victims. We don't need to make it harder for them. And so if we better educate ourselves on how we can support victims, then we can better prepare our community as well as agencies like RCC or UTMB that directly work with survivors, as well as University of Houston. Because a majority of victims, I think it's about 3 times more likely to be sexually assaulted on a college campus in the highest population range for sexual assaults. 3 times more likely if you're attending college. Most universities that I know of nowadays participate in some form of violence prevention education for their students. I know that my university had it. We had one is too many, and you could not move on with your classes unless you completed the course. And I really love that because I was very happy to take the course, but for somebody who is less inclined, it forces them to, which is really important because, like I said, education is the key to prevention. And then we hold perpetrators accountable. Victims are more likely to report if they know that their perpetrator will be held accountable for their actions. Right now, we see a lot of victims not wanting to report because we have a system in place that doesn't always protect them. It sometimes does, but we also have to make sure it's not just 1 or 2 individuals whose perpetrators are being put behind bars. We need to make sure that all victims, perpetrators, are put behind bars. For child sexual abuse, on average, a perpetrator has about 9 victims. And 1 in 5 children in the United States has already spoken to a perpetrator online without them knowing. So we have to mobilize the prevention efforts. We have to educate our children. One thing that I've come across working with multiple communities, and I absolutely understand this, sometimes you don't want a random stranger teaching your children about sexual assault. It's a very tricky subject, and depending on the age range, you would maybe want to facilitate that training. So what I have done with communities is if they don't want me speaking directly to their children, I will teach the parents, and the parents will teach the kids. I don't care who I reach out to as long as I can train you. That's all that matters. So we work with multiple demographics here. You know, Galveston is probably a lot more urban than the communities that I work with in Lamarck, so you have to fit and you have to mold to your communities. But I promise you, once you do, it makes the transition much easier, and you start forming relationships. It starts small with the financial literacy classes, with the healthy relationship classes. And then when you start fostering that trust and that development with the teens, with the parents, then you can open up to more, I would say, detailed tactics where you actually teach the dynamics of sexual assault rather than just healthy relationships. And then one last thing that I'll leave you guys with besides this is please, y'all, use specific terms whenever you guys are teaching your children about their body parts. I know that Mrs. Nell is probably thinking of this because you taught me this myself, but we had a case one day where a little girl disclosed to her teacher that her uncle was licking her cookie. It took several months, I believe, for them to realize that when she said cookie, she actually meant her vagina. This could have been avoided if we use proper terms. You have to use proper terms with your kids because if they use slang terms, then it makes it much harder for adults to understand what they are going through. If you teach your kids proper terms, then that little girl, she would have gone through months of sexual assault, sexual abuse from her uncle because she would have been taught the proper term, just one term, and it would have changed the difference. So teach your kids properly, give them the right information. I absolutely agree with age-appropriate teaching. You can teach the no-touch zone, you can teach healthy relationships as teenagers, and then you can get into the nitty-gritty stuff as an adult. There are different levels for education on every level. But that's kind of what we do here at RCC, and then I'll leave some space for questions at the end. But these are my resources. Our main I would say benefactor and where we get a lot of our information from is TASA, which is the Texas Association Against Sexual Assault. They're the one who certifies us as a sexual assault service agency. They have wonderful information and it's free. They have free educational tools on their website. The Texas Department of Family and Protective Services, we work really closely with them. They provide wonderful information. RAIN, again, free information. This information is available to anybody. It's just sometimes it's harder if you don't know where to look for it. Then we've got the Texas Legal Services as well as Texas Crime Victim Services Division. Wonderful, wonderful resources for victims who are looking to report as well as to get action done against their perpetrator. And then we've got the Resource and Crisis Center with us. You guys know me, Miss Jessie, and then Carlos and Miss Brandy. We are always ready to talk to you guys. And then I will pass it on to Miss Melvin.
Hi, everybody. So my name actually is Nellie, but I go by Nell. If you call UTMB and you ask for Nellie, they're going to be able to have anybody like that. Because it's been so many years that everybody just called me that. So I started 18 years ago doing sexual assault. And if you came to our hospital before the year 2000 and you were sexually assaulted, then what would happen is do not make eye contact with the charge nurse because you will be told you're doing the exam with the doctor. And then you go in the room, you open up the box, the doctor's there, and you're reading. How do you think a patient felt that you are actually reading the instructions to the doctor? There really was no connection the way we do it now. So it was actually the Resource and Crisis Center that approached UTV and asked if they would be willing to be part of the SARC program. And it took 2 years for us to get any kind of training. So in 2002, the Office of Attorney came out and trained 10 nurses. And a year later, I think there was only 2 of us. We didn't realize what we were getting into. I thought it was a one-day class, day off work. You could go for a class, I knew what was in the box. But at that time, it was actually 8 days. You had 4 days of adult and adolescents, and then you had 4 days of pediatric. It's a lot longer now. There's a lot more to the training than what we did it years ago. I look back at my charts from when I first started to what they are now. It is totally different. But we also have learned a lot more on how to deal with our patients. And the thing it is, patients who don't remember what happened or they tell it out of sequence, people thought they were lying. Now, if they tell it to us, we're like, no, that's normal, that's the way I expect to hear it. I didn't call out for help. Okay, let me explain why you didn't. We can tell them now why they acted the way they did. I can't tell you how many times, and for real, and I have walked people out of my patient's room. If an officer comes in and says, well, how short was your skirt? I'm like, there's the door. I will let that patient know that skirt did not make a difference. What you wore, what you said did not make a difference. What made the difference is, did you say yes or no? And if you cannot answer that, then you did not consent to that. And so many of them, they come in, they're embarrassed and ashamed, they will not report. Because, you know, I had all those drinks and I said, so you were drinking all night, did you, like before you drank, did you tell them you wanted to have sex with them? Well, no. Was it during? No. So afterwards you told them. I said, when exactly did you say you wanted to have sex? And she goes, I didn't. Let them answer their own question. Don't let this define them and they take on all that responsibility. So what happens now when they come to the emergency room? Well, first of all, we're going to have them see the doctor because people do not realize when they're hurt and when they're not. You see people walk away from car accidents with broken legs, right? And they're walking. Well, the same thing is with a sexual assault victim. They are traumatized. They're still in that trauma phase where all the hormones and the chemicals are raised. Those are the ones that are confusing them. They're not allowing them to remember the sequence. They're not allowing them to reconcile what has really happened at that point. And that's why a lot of the blame is on themselves. And it takes a while for that to come down. So let the doctors check you out first. Make sure that everything is okay. And sometimes we have the patients. Crystal Beach, I used to say, they need to just put a sign up there, shot, stab, or rape, enter here. Because we've seen a lot of it. And one girl, the rapist actually drove over her hips multiple times. You could see the tire tracks. She was not ready for no sexual assault exam because we did not know what kind of injury she had. So that's why you always make sure, does she remember everything? No, she was completely just hysterical. Do you know who we called to come in there to bring her down? An advocate from the Resource and Crisis Center. And usually we do not bring them in until they're stable. But at that day, I called and I said, can you please come in? And the trauma team goes, who is that person? I said, the advocate. Because she stood at the foot, or at the head of the bed and was talking to the patient the whole time. Just because they knew how to react to it. As for forensic nurses, we weren't allowed in that room yet at that time to start our exam, because now is the time to be critical thinking to make sure we've got everything done. And we do that with every patient. Some of them may have had nothing, but we're gonna check to make sure. Because people think when they come in for a SANE exam, the first thing they think is that is the last thing we think. We're nurses, and we're gonna do the nursing process on every one of the patients. You come in with chest pain. How many of you ever had somebody say, well, I don't know if you really have any chest pain? Do you hear that? But yet when you come in with sexual assault, why are you questioning it? That is a complaint. We're not there to say truth and lie. We're not there to judge. Just like with chest pain, we don't know, is it caused from actual cardiac anxiety or is it drugs? Well, the sexual assault, how it occurred, no. We want to know what was the mechanism of injuries, what happened, and we want to make sure that we treat them. Once they come into our exam, once they're ours, we will do full consent, and we tell them everything we're going to do. But the big difference with this is it's voluntary. So if you say, well, I'll let you do this, I'll let you do this, you know what? Okay, that's what we're going to do. But it's their decision. We talk about what happened. And saying words, oh, now you want to hear how many different words for genitalia. It's an adults and the kids. And yes, we do go tell the family, stop calling it a plum. We actually go tell them, because it can be very confusing for the child. You don't call the arm something else. So the other thing is, it makes it freer for the child to talk about it if you call it the real thing. Call it a vulva, you know, call it a penis, because you're normalizing it. So many times, like when I was younger, we don't say the word penis, it's like, you know, down there. Well, why are we keeping it quiet? It's part of your body. So we try to normalize it, but we talk about what happened, and it's what happened to you. Can you explain that to me? We don't ask, oh, did the penis go into the vagina? No. We want them to tell what happened. We don't want to put no words in, but we want them to tell us everything that happened. And we go for the 5 senses, because when you're in a crisis moment, you do not remember things, but the senses. Do you remember a smell? Oh yeah, I remember. What was happening when you had that? You remember that smell. And remember, the triggers come later. It can be weeks, months, years. And guess what it is? It's the senses, the 5 senses that trigger these things. So we use that technique. At the same time, we're also trauma-informed, meaning that the patient is part of the exam. We work together. Oh, do you want to have this done first or this? Do you want your blood pressure come from this arm or this arm? Let's work together, because that person that did it to them did not give them choices. But we do. We want them to make the decision. We're giving you back the power. And then we look at them from head to toe. And I always tell people, nope, it's nothing like what you see on Law and Order. We don't work that way. We don't have police officers in the room, and we don't have them standing naked in back of a drape. We actually give them privacy to get into a gown, and we look at one part of their body at a time. If it's a child, I can't guarantee the gown will stay on, because they're pretty loose, and you can attest for it. Those gowns just come off and they're naked. Even when we had visitors as part of our suite one time, the little child wanted to go up there naked and see who was all visiting. So, but we try our best to give them dignity and give them a lot of control. And then the genital exam. Again, everything has to be explained. And it has to be explained to the children as well, what we're going to do. But the good thing with children, when we're doing that exam, we are teaching. Hey, anybody ever take a picture of you down here? And one of the children goes, oh yeah, he uses his phone and takes pictures. And there's a box in his room where he has lots of pictures. And I just went, what did this child just tell me? So you pick up the phone and you call law enforcement, you might want to check out a box in his room. And it was, there's 300 pictures in there. So these kids will tell you a lot. And they also don't want you to put anybody in jail for what they did to them, because these people groom them, they're their best friends, and if the parent has told them we're going to put them in jail, they actually don't really want to talk to us. And so they'll ask us, well, are you gonna put them in jail? No, I'm a nurse, I don't put anybody in jail. That's not my purpose, and that's not the purpose of my exam. But my exam is to be their voice when they can't speak. And that's for adults as well, because we know in domestic violence, and majority of the time, they know this person. So if they won't go to court against the person, because, and people think, oh no, now they're just in love and they just want to pass it. But a lot of times they're afraid, they have been threatened. So if they go to court, they're afraid what he's going to do. So, and I'm saying he, we also have females that are rapists, but just for this scenario. But they're afraid, and then they thank you afterwards that you were able to go and speak for them, because now we put them away and I'm really safe. You see how that works? You have to be cognizant of everything that patient does. And when we started 18 years ago, so 2004 is actually when we officially became a program at UTMB, where we actually got a designated room. I had nobody except the advocates, and I didn't even know an advocate did, because that was not something we were taught. I'm kind of like, well, there's a person that's going to come in. And at that time, there was nothing about them being in the room with us, you know, and how we were supposed to work together. So over the years, you can see how many changes I've seen, and how many people we now work with to help this victim. I tell them there's a team here. It's not me that's going to help you. It's going to be the whole team. And we have sexual assault response teams where we talk to the DA, we talk to law enforcement, we have the advocates there, we have everybody. I'm going to mention one, and I'm going to call out to ACCT. We actually have had victims who've been raped with full-blown AIDS, and we could not do anything. Does anybody know how much that medication costs? Do you want to tell them how much that is?
For a 30-day supply, roughly $5,000.
Correct. Who can afford that? So ACCT came and approached us, and they said, hey, you know what? We can bring your patients. And they do. We fill out a packet, I call them and say, tell me, give me the good drugs. That's usually what I tell them. And 20 minutes later, they're there, I give them the packet, they give me the meds and the bags, hand it to the patient. And the thing that is, it's not a cost to the patient. And I can remember patients crying, going, how am I going to afford it? You know, and especially when we were told the perpetrator actually was full-blown AIDS, that it was a horrible feeling. But now we took it a step further last week, because pregnant people can't have that drug. They could get a different one, but we only had arrangements for the other drug. So I called ACCT, and what was it, 30 minutes later, I hadn't finished the packet, there was the medication for the patient. That's what we do for teams. We have unbound if we suspect somebody is human trafficking, and it falls on our laps. Don't worry about the red flags in our teams, because they'll be sitting there, and as we're getting the history, and the one girl says, and he got to keep the $300. What was that? You got to keep the $300? What was that? Yes, and actually, it's a huge rate. We found out later on, we had like 5 victims from him. But we didn't know that because we didn't know enough about it. So we now get education on that as well. So we have a lot of people that we can reach out to for help. Rescue America actually has brought patients to us because they're like, we can't find anybody to do exams. Okay, you help us, I'll help you. And that's what we do. We have legal resources for when they're immigrants. They come in, well, I don't want to report because, and I'm like, the police don't care about that. They're here because you were sexually assaulted. Or I was so high and I'm underage and I was drinking. And do you have it in your pocket? No. Well, then they don't care because we're calling them for sexual assault. And there's so much fear, like we can help them with so many things when they come in and tell them it's okay. We don't have blame for you. We're not judging you. Like, we're here to help. And guess what? I've got a whole team. And it usually starts with an advocate. A lot of times they're like, I don't want an advocate. If it is because they don't want to tell their story, guess what? We can tell that story to the advocates so that they don't have to repeat it. So there is so much, and if we need to get shelter, we have so many people. We have people that actually donate survivors' bags to us. So you know when the people come in, we take their clothes. And when are you going to get them back? Well, you don't want them back because the crime lab cuts little holes wherever they think they have to test it. But before they can get clothes bought and replaced, from the Office of Attorney General, we can provide them with a bag with clothes, underwear, all your toiletry is in there. And we hand it to them, and we have a shower in our suite, so they don't have to go in no hallway, and they walk out and they're wearing scrubs. And I said, okay, now you're in scrubs, so you actually have to work now. But the reason is, they don't need to be, like, so everybody knows what they've been there. We keep very private, especially human trafficking. Everybody always is curious about it. We had a kidnapping case, nobody in our ER knew we had a patient in there, because we did our job, we took care of it, and made sure she was safe. So those are the kind of things that we do as sexual assault nurses. That evidence collection is the last of our thoughts. We want to do the best we can with evidence collection, but if all we did was evidence collection, they wouldn't need a nurse. But we have so many other things, and like I said, we have to work with our partners to make sure that we take care of our patients and take the time with them. We also, with children, we try to be as protective as we can. We have admitted them into the hospital for the 3 days while CBS works with them, because sometimes we see things that we're like, this is not right, something's not right here. So that there is time to look into it to see, is this actually a good extension with the parents? But do we jump right away? Do they need to go into foster care? No, sometimes they just need to stay with another family member for a while. So that's kind of the way we look at it. We want to make sure that they're safe. So we try, like I said, to cover every basis we can with that patient. So then they walk out and they're so overwhelmed, and I tell them quite freely, you just go ahead and call your RCC advocate day or night if you've got questions, because of the sayings we rotate through. But they are so overwhelmed with information, do you think they're going to remember it? I tell them, well, I'm going to call you tomorrow with an exam, and you have to know all this. I said, are you going to? I know they're not going to. And we actually have to bring quite a bit of humor into our examiners. But I tell them, don't think it just because we're using humor here that we're not taking this serious. But sometimes that's the way to bring it out. And with children, of course, we color and have popsicle parties. If you like popsicles, be a SANE, because you can have popsicle parties at the end. And after we're finished, we like, you want a popsicle? Because guess what they tell us during our popsicle parties? Now they're done with the exam, they're relaxed, now they're going to tell us stuff. Oh yeah, we played in the tent in the living room. Oh really? Who'd you play with? Because they don't always tell us the histories, but they sure tell us about who they play with in the tent and how they play. And so we have, yeah, our histories that way, but we're not going to force anybody to even tell us histories. So that's what sexual assault nurse examiners are. And by the way, almost all of our sexual assault patients are not just sexual assault. So we are trained in strangulation, human trafficking, domestic violence, elderly abuse, child abuse, because sexual assault is never on its own. We never knew about strangulation like we did now, and so many of our patients have been strangled, but they don't remember because they've gone unconscious and go, were you strangled? No. Choked? No. But I don't remember that space. Well, what happened? And was something on your neck? Did somebody put pressure on your neck? That's how we talk to you. You learn the language. So, and I will pass this off to you.
Hi, my name is Maria, and my conversation could have gone both ways. So in a previous life, I was a medical social worker working in a children's hospital, and I worked in the emergency room. So I was BFFs with the SANE nurses because, unfortunately, a lot of the cases that we received were sexual assault or family violence. So that's one compartment of my life, but I'm really here to talk about the university's role in this and representing our department. And so I'm coming from the University of Houston Clear Lake, and it's in your backyard here. We see a lot of students and people returning back to school, feeding into the community colleges here, and then finishing out their degree over at Clear Lake campus. And we've been around for 50 years. Our social work program has been around for 20 years. And the majority of my role is to train the next social workers are going to be out there working in environment, in communities that are going to have these difficult conversations. I usually tell tell my students, if you can talk to your clients about money, religion, sex, sexual assault, domestic violence, you can talk to them about anything, right? And those are some of the topics that are the most difficult to talk about. And so in the training that we do and internship connections that we have with community, we prepare our students to be able to be in an internship role that handles difficult cases like this, and then career prep them for the next phase of their life, whether they decide to work as a social worker licensed at the bachelor's level, or whether they go on and get their master's to get a more advanced clinical license. Well, as we're prepping our students, and the timing is coincidental but also perfect, we also interview students to be ready for internship, and that's what we did the majority of last week. We did 4 days of intensive interviewing. What comes out in those interviews is, are you prepared to work with XYZ population, because that's what you mentioned in your application. What population you couldn't work with? And sometimes there's, we could not work with survivors of domestic violence or the perpetrators of these crimes, etc., because XYZ happened. Here we go. And so we're mandated reporters on campus. We have to report that, and we have to stop the error. And we've stopped more interviews than we'd like to count, and making sure that students are getting the support that they need. Whether the crime happened 2 days ago, or it happened 2 years ago, or it happened 20 years ago. We have students in our program that are young as, I just turned 18, the fall semester, and as old as 80. So we have a wide variety. And so to kind of back up on the stats, just that you mentioned, right, 1 in 6, on campus it's 1 in 2. And so, although our social work program isn't practicing as clinicians, counselors, we are advisors, we are mentors, and we're also supporters of making sure that our students are able to finish their career and be able to be prepared. Let me do the work that happened to me, so I'm ready to do the work, right? Because I really want to do work in domestic violence, but I haven't done the work myself. So in order to prevent additional harm, we have to kind of stop and make sure that our students are ready. And if that means that they don't advance this semester or this year, we can't put people out there that are going to cause additional harm if they're not ready to do the work. Right? And unfortunately, we've had to do a lot of that in the last couple of years. And that speaks to our profession. That speaks to the reputation of our program. But we also want to protect community to make sure that we're not putting people out there that are not going to be ready. If we put a student at your agency and we have a partnership for them to internship with you, if they're going to be consoled by the client, then we've lost control right there, right? So we need to make sure that we're prepared. And so resources like RRCC, we have counseling services on campus. We have a nurse, we have social workers that are in a role that provide counseling and resources, etc. But they're limited, right, in what they can do. So sometimes we're looking out in community to see what other resources are available for us to be able to provide that support that limits, once they leave campus. And so we partnered, we've had interns and student volunteers, etc., but we also know our lane, right? As educators, there's only so much that we can do, and we encourage our students to make sure that they're doing the work and they're able to kind of compartmentalize all of those things to be able to be out there in the community doing these things. And like I mentioned, if that means that we pause their career as a student for a little bit for them to be able to do the work, then that's a tough decision to make with them. And more students have come out and shared their experiences. Sometimes they come into social work thinking that because they have the work to do, that they can do it in a program. But managing that and your assignments and a paper and a presentation is not gonna be the best environment for them to do that. So we also wanna give them the experience of what it feels like to be on the other side of the desk, on the other side of the couch, or whatever that may be, for them to be prepared for that. And if they're not ready to move on, then they're not ready to move on. Unfortunately, we do have more and more departments opening up that offer support for students like this. And just you mentioned that our students do go through a mandated workshop training, whatever the university calls it, and even staff and faculty do as well. It's part of the onboarding that they do as a student. So they have to do certain workshops that they have to check off their first year at the campus. And this is through the University of Houston system-wide, not just at Clear Lake. So they go through Title IX awareness and training, what it means to give consent, and healthy relationships. So all of those things have to be checked off before they actually get to enroll in their courses. And then there's other resources that are offered that are open workshops, open forums for students to be able to get additional training if they want, or additional peer training. We just started a peer support last year. We received funding for that, and part of it is being aware of what it's like to have a mental health crisis that may be paired up with a possible sexual assault, sexual harassment. I mean, we've had students share a lot of things in those closed doors during those interviews that we wish weren't happening at that time, because they're ready to move on to the next part of their career. But I think violence and trauma doesn't have a set criteria of who it impacts, as we saw with COVID. So we definitely open the door for students to be able to have that open conversation. And if we're the first person they've ever talked to that about, then we make sure that it's trauma informed. I love that you use that. And doing that approach of being more of a, not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you, and tell me about it. And sometimes we're that first point of contact for them. So we want to make sure that we are able to connect them to the right resources on campus. And when that reaches its limit, then providing resources off campus. A lot of our students come from this area, from the island and from Texas City, Dickinson. And so sometimes they're not aware that these resources are available because they've never been able to seek out, or for whatever reason didn't seek out those resources when the event first happened. And so we definitely connect them back, have them do the work, and then they can come back into the program so they're able to do the work with clients and not cause additional harm. So that is one of the things that we bring to the table as a program at the University of Houston.
Now we're ready to get some questions. You guys have any?
Because I see all different people here that I know, I just want to make sure that everyone, when you brought up mandatory reporting, everyone in Texas is a mandatory reporter, not just teachers, not just, the law in Texas is if my neighbor knows that I'm doing something, they're a mandatory reporter. And people kind of get that mixed up and think, oh, well, it's not up to me. It's up to the teacher or the counselor or somebody else, but it's up to every Texas resident, and that's a law in Texas. And the other thing I wanted to bring up is one of the new laws that was passed in September has limited what the department can do for these children. The language was changed by our legislature to immediate danger. So if a worker goes to the door and everybody looks good, that child's not going to get removed. Even if you see a bruise and mom says, oh, he fell off the kitchen counter. Kids fall off the counters. And that was changed by our legislature, so please vote. Please look at these bills that are getting shoved through. They have taken children's rights away like that. When a family does, say an investigator goes out and they think there's something going on, but they can't remove, and so they offer them services and say, hey, we're gonna offer you these services through our family base. They're gonna come in and they're gonna help you, and that parent can slam the door. There is no consequence. So if they go back to court and they say, hey, they slammed the door, they said they don't want it, but we'd really like an order to participate from the judge. And so it comes to court, and there's a parent, and the judge says, what services do you want them to work? And the worker says, hey, we really think they could use this or this or this. And the parent says, nope, not going to do it. Then you don't have to follow the court order. Our legislature did that September 1st. So just please remember that your numbers are going to change drastically because our kiddos have no one to tell because the door can be closed in their face.
And I'll add on to what Ms. Barber said. So that has also changed with K through 12 education for students as well. So we have a law called Genes Law. It's actually about to be a national law. So that Genes Law is specifically for Texas education K through 12. So it mandates that sexual assault and child abuse prevention education be taught to both students and staff and faculty members of all kinds. That has changed for educators like me as well as the other 73 programs in the state of Texas. As of September 1st, so again, the same timeline, for some people who have probably already heard this because I try to tell as many people as possible, they are no longer allowing the 73 sexual assault education programs to go into schools, into K through 12 schools. That happens September 1st. That's why I work with libraries, it's why I work with community centers, and it's why I predominantly work with colleges. I would love to go to high schools, I would love to go to elementary schools. However, they are no longer allowing sexual assault education programmers to go in and teach this education. It is predominantly being taught by people within the school system. Again, as long as it's being taught, that's all that matters to me. However, you want people who are educated in social work, in sexual assault nurse examinations, because I've gone through 40 hours of sexual assault nurse examination training. Not Ms. Nell's training, but I've learned the process so if a victim asks me a question, then I can actually be able to give them that truthful answer, going back to how we can raise reporting is by giving truthful, honest answers to our victims so they can get resources that are accurate for their needs. No longer for 73 programs in the state of Texas, so we're really trying to work on that.
Does that law include for students and teachers or just for students?
The students and teachers, so it's students, teachers, and administrative staff. So that includes everybody who works within an education program.
And does that also include TEA's old mandated that children's advocacy centers can come and at least provide recognizing and reporting to the teachers?
So from what we got from September 1st, I can't reach out to the PTA, I can't reach out to teachers, I can't reach out to students, but as you guys have probably heard this before, my middle name is Pivot and Loophole. I will find a way. So what I have done is I have made contacts at the local libraries because they are in contact with the teachers and they still have access to the teachers and the students and the parents as well. So if I give my information to the librarian puts their name on the flyer or whatnot, then they can give the flyer to the school. So I'm finding ways to still reach the demographic, because most people who are sexually assaulted, the age range is between about 17 to 34, that's the highest age. So you're talking about high schoolers to college students. I can still go to colleges, but I can't reach that demographic to teach them the information to prevent these crimes from happening, which is the main form of how we combat this public health crisis. So I will add to that as well. But sorry, you guys, that's some bad news.
And my middle name is ask for forgiveness rather than permission. So one thing that we can do to partner is when we have high school family nights at the college, if we can have you be there on campus as a resource. That's one way we can definitely figure out. Yeah.
Let me tell you all one other thing that changed. You can no longer be anonymous when you call something in. You have to give your name and your information, or they will not even take the call. Again, please vote.
And additionally with the mandatory reporting, and again, going back to anybody 18 and above is a mandatory reporter. So if, say for example, if Ms. Now, Dr. Maria and I are all sitting right here, if we see something happen, it's not one of us reporting, all three of us have to report. So it means that anybody who sees an act or even hears about it has to report something. I would also mention that when you call, they will ask you a bunch of questions. They will ask you, do you know if there's a gun in the home? Do you know if there's any history of violence? They will ask you as much information as possible. If you don't know, say so. It's okay to say, I don't know, because you want to give them accurate information, not just for reporting sakes, but also for CPS, because they are the ones going to these house calls, so you want to make it as safe for them as possible.
And provide the name of the school. That's what I meant.
So you answered my first question, because I wanted to know why it wasn't being taught in high school, so I'm glad we covered that. But for the RCC advocates, hypothetically had a kid on a caseload, was assaulted, moving back to Texas, she'll be back in the area. Am I able to get her an advocate to sort of support her, because she's still in a spot where maybe she's not going to talk about what happened or recognize what happened, but she'll be moved out of the facility back into a parent's home, and I imagine that there will be triggers that are going to bring up these events for her that she's not properly worked through. So are we able to, as an additional resource for the department, reach out, and even if they're not staying here or it's not?
Yeah, absolutely. So we offer not just residential services, but also non-residential. We have a 24/7 hotline, so we are always ready for a call, and we take walk-in appointments as well. We work really closely with all community members, and we even work with families as well. So if the families need to be trained on trauma-informed care to better help the victim, then we can also offer those services. But we will work with anybody, and all of our services are free. So if she or he needs that resource, you can always have them call. And whether or not they want to set up an appointment or they just need to do a walk-in that day, absolutely okay. We will help whoever comes to our doors. Absolutely.
Does she need permission from anyone? Can you help minors?
So minors is a little bit different. Is she a minor?
She is a minor.
Okay, yeah. So it's a little bit different with minors. We do work with the Child Advocacy Center here on the island. If they have a parent with them, they can come and sit with us.
And if I'm the medical consenter and I'm her legal guardian, does that change anything?
Does that work? We got some of our CIS members in the back. Sorry, guys, I feel like I'm gonna pull you in on this one.
If you have power of attorney or legal guardianship, you can sign this.
So would she have to stay for the appointment? She would have to be with her as a whole? No?
Just so long as she signs for businesses or anything else.
What about children or teens that are autistic? Lots of them can't really speak or say what is happening to them. How do we try to at least try to give them the help that they need? Like if to at least tell you what is happening to them.
A lot of times, actually, they don't. But what we are very good at is, it's not just what we see on your body, how are you acting? And so if there is trying to assess them somewhere on the body and they're like refusing, I will document not what I think, but exactly how they're acting. You know, like what they're saying, how they're pushing, whatever, you document all that. And then if they do say anything, just document exactly what they say. We don't document, like almost all of ours is all in quotes, exactly what the patient says. We don't try to embellish it or anything like that, but we've had autistic. I do know one thing is not to ask him something because I didn't want to say, hey, was it so-and-so? So I said, was it the snowman? And the police kept saying, who's talking about snowman? I was like, it was me. So I know now, like, just listen to them. And like, here, you want to color? Do they draw pictures? That all goes into the chart.
Yeah.
So that's how we deal with it. We don't force it.
Because I had a case where the child did a lot of spinning. So the grandparent thought, well, somebody's touching this child because they're doing all, but then the child is autistic and that's what they do to soothe themselves. So when it's something like that, it's hard and I wanted to know, is there a tactic? Is it a way? Is it something when you come across cases like that?
Well, then we call Dr. Beach. Patricia Beach is our pediatric child abuse physician. And a lot of times, like, she's really good when they're autistic. I'll say, okay, I saw this child, this is what the child did. And she goes, yeah, just like I said, some of the things is soothing for them. And so she can verify that, and I will look and see if there's any injuries, or if they refuse to let me do anything, that's well documented.
A lot of the times you'll also see changing behaviors, so you can ask the caretakers, is there anything new that's different from from their regular routine? If there's a regular routine that's pretty strict and, they tend to spend a little bit more in the evenings, etc. If they see more of that, then there's more soothing being done. So a change in any type of like routine or behavior that can be observed by the caregiver to report back to you, that's going to be useful information also for the medical team.
And that's what usually brings them in.
Yeah.
Nurse, now, can you clarify the age in, we know that everybody has the ability to give consent to any type of general exam, but is there a age limit? Having experienced the process in multiple states, it's so varied that from our understanding, anyone under the age of 18 can consent or not consent to like a vaginal exam. But from what recent experience has taught me that children under the age of 16, we can consent for them. I guess I just want clarification on what that age is. If we're trying to get criminal prosecution, they're wanting to do the process, but sort of what's the age cutoff?
So 14 and older, they can sign it and consent. However, we prefer to have an adult double sign it to the age of 18. If they're under that age, the child doesn't sign anything. Well, sometimes we let them draw a picture on the consent form saying, is it okay for us to look at your body? And they'll draw some fish or something on there, and we allow that. And even little children have the right to say, no, you can't touch me, you can't do it, and we cannot, because what's the difference between me forcing an exam or the perpetrator doing it? And that's why they allow us so much time with the kids and we don't have any of the adults in it. The law says, oh, you can let the parents in, and we have found every time we did it, the exam did not go forward because the parents distract the child. So usually we're like, come on in, and we tell the parent, if that child just once resists us, the exam is over. And that's when you learn how to color with them, talk to them, play with them. And you know what? Food works really good because food and drink always calms them down. But we don't ever say, if you do this, we'll give you food or whatever. It's always like that's how we very seldom have it. The children have to assent to the exam. Because it's voluntary, even if you're 2 years old, if you resist us, and, I mean, we've had some bad cases come in, and if they were just assaulted, do you think they're gonna let us look at their genitalia? So we usually say, can we just change your diaper? We'll take the diaper down and take pictures, and then they go usually to Dr. Beach within the week, because at that time, they're too traumatized to let us touch anything. So 14 and older, they can actually sign, because sometimes we can't find a parent. We're not gonna delay the exam. If 14, as long as they can actually, if it's all informed, if you can tell me back what I'm going to be doing, and you know that you can refuse, then you can go ahead and sign. But if they're under that age, and the parent goes, I want them to have the exam, and they come in, no, you're not doing the exam, we are not doing the exam. It's the patient that gives us assent for consent. And by the way, if the parent says, no, you're not going to do an exam on the child, then under family code, we can do it, go ahead if we suspect that there's something going on. Of course, there's usually a CPS investigator standing beside us.
And that's up to 16, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions, guys?
And I just want to clarify, our exams, the patients never pay for it. And we now have it, that they don't pay for that ER visit either. So if they're at another hospital, and the hospital says they want us to come see a SANE nurse, they transfer to us. That is all paid for by emergency medical compensation. So it's only for that encounter. And they come in, so, because we sometimes have, I can't afford the CT scan, I don't want it. Don't worry about it, we sign this paper, and we're gonna send it directly to OIG. But the actual time that they spend with us, the SANE nurses, is illegal for us to ever charge. That all goes to OIG's office direct.
All right, thank you guys so much for coming. You guys can always come up here, ask us some questions, and then we've also got a couple of our CIS or crisis intervention specialists in the back. They work directly with the sexual assault nurse examiners at the hospital, so if you guys have any questions for them, they're in the back. Sorry, guys.
Thank you for being here today. There's a lot of community partners present, so there's a few minutes that we have. You know, if you want to use this time to get to know some of the community partners, feel free to do so. Exchange business cards, and thank you for being here, y'all.
Thank you.